You walk through the front door. The house is completely quiet. Maybe there's a sofa cushion on the floor, or the corner of a rug is flicked over. Most of us see this and assume our dog was simply bored, maybe a little mischievous, before settling down for a nap. But behavioral researchers have been leaving cameras running to see what actually happens when that door clicks shut. In 2010, the team at the University of Milan installed recording equipment in the homes of 23 dogs to document the exact sequence of isolation. The timeline of their findings is striking. Vocalization, barking, whining, howling, begins just 3 minutes and 15 seconds after the owner's departure. By minute 7, the dog escalates to destructive behavior. That's how fast shoes are at risk. What you perceive as a random bout of mischief when you get home from work is rarely about boredom. You are walking into the quiet aftermath of an immediate, severe physiological crisis that started the moment you left. That panic sequence actually starts well before you even touch the doorknob. Through a process called backward chaining, dogs learn to link your entire morning routine in reverse. You check your phone, you put on your shoes, you grab your bag. You've repeated these actions hundreds of times. To human eyes, it's just getting ready for work. To a dog's nervous system, each of these mundane steps acts as a blaring alarm, signaling that isolation is imminent. Because of this conditioning, the dog begins exhibiting measurable stress responses while you are still standing right there in the living room. They might start panting heavily, pacing across the floor, or following closely at your heels, anticipating the separation. By the time you finally reach the door, your dog isn't operating from the baseline of calm. They are already deep into a state of severe anticipatory trauma, bracing for an absence they know they cannot stop. Eventually, that first frantic phase of door scratching and howling gradually fades out. If you were watching through a window, you might think the dog had finally accepted the situation and settled down. The cameras tell a different story. As the noise stops, the panting actually increases. Their heart rate stays highly elevated. The dog has shifted from an outward expression of distress to an internal one. The biological terror is still running at full capacity. Looking at this graph of stress levels over several hours, we see a distinct pattern emerge. The data doesn't show a clean decline into relaxation. Instead, exactly every 23 to 28 minutes, the dog experiences a renewed burst of panic, pacing, and vocalization. Those quiet spaces between the spikes are not moments of calm. They are periods of physical exhaustion. The dog lacks the energy to bark, but their nervous system remains entirely on edge. A dog left alone for an 8-hour workday isn't catching up on sleep. They are trapped in a relentless, exhausting loop, cycling between acute panic and physical depletion until you return. This brings us to the dogs that sit in perfect silence all day. In the 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman observed that animals exposed to inescapable stress would eventually stop trying to react. He called this learned helplessness. But in 2016, Seligman revised his own theory. He realized that passivity is not a behavior the animal learns. Passivity is the brain's default biological state when it is crushed under prolonged, inescapable stress. The animal hasn't accepted the situation. It has stopped believing its actions matter. Veterinary researchers tested this in 2019 by measuring long-term cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. By analyzing hair samples from dogs, they tracked weeks and months of hormonal accumulation, rather than relying on a single stressful afternoon. The results were totally counterintuitive. Some of the most severely anxious, perfectly silent dogs showed lower cortisol levels than calmer dogs. Their stress response had been running hot for so long that the system had completely burned out. A dog that appears quietly fine might be the one you need to worry about most. Another study from Winkelpan University in Sweden looked at cortisol in both dogs and their owners. They found the levels were perfectly synchronized. If the owner carried a chronically high baseline of stress, the dog did too. The owner's hormonal state directly predicted the dog's. Separation anxiety is rarely a general fear of being alone. Your dog is experiencing a systemic biological withdrawal. Their own nervous system has calibrated itself to yours, and when you leave, they lose their anchor. This is why the massive consumer industry built around separation anxiety usually fails. Pheromone diffusers, leaving the TV running, or providing complex puzzle toys show little to no measurable effect in rigorous trials. They offer temporary distraction, but they cannot fix the dog's underlying terror of uncertainty. Even the most common piece of advice, getting a second dog, rarely works. The panic is tethered to the absence of one specific human being. Adding another dog to the house often just results in two dogs experiencing completely separate anxieties. To find out what actually drives this trauma, the Royal Veterinary College ran a longitudinal study called Generation Pup. They tracked hundreds of dogs from adoption through their first 6 months to see exactly what predicted separation issues. The data surprised plenty of trainers. Those long, emotional goodbyes at the door, they had no significant effect. What mattered deeply was the return. Owners who came home to a chewed-up rug and responded with visible frustration or raised voices made their dogs 6 times more likely to develop separation-related behaviors. A dog cannot connect your afternoon anger to a pillow they destroyed hours ago. They only connect your anger to your arrival. This links both ends of the absence to fear. They panic when you walk out, and they brace for punishment when you walk back in, creating a devastating daily loop. Breaking this cycle requires updating the dog's internal predictions, and the most heavily evidence-backed method is graduated exposure. This process is incredibly slow. It means walking to the door, touching the handle, and immediately stepping away, then leaving for 5 seconds and returning. You build a history of safe returns so incrementally that the dog's nervous system never has a chance to spike into panic. For severe cases, medication provides a crucial bridge. A clinical trial of 229 dogs found that combining behavior modification with fluoxetine yielded a 73% improvement rate, significantly outperforming training alone. The drug doesn't act as a sedative to put the dog to sleep. Instead, it targets what researchers call cognitive bias. It softens their tendency to view ambiguous situations pessimistically, giving their brain the flexibility it needs to form new, neutral beliefs about being alone. The ultimate goal of this therapy isn't obedience. It is teaching a highly calibrated nervous system that the sound of the door closing and the sound of the door opening are the exact same event. They are just happening in a different order.